Do it.
Oh, goodness. Thank you, Nicole. Okay, so now you know who our keynote is. No surprise there. Wonderful Nicole Lance. Thank you all for joining us and welcome back. If you were with us earlier in the earlier session, that was a wonderful session. My goodness, we had some talented women in our profession, don't we? And I am Kimberly Richardson. If you were not a part of the earlier session, I am the Assistant City Manager of Peoria, Illinois, City of Peoria, Illinois, and I'm also the current president of the League of Women in Government. And so I hope you enjoyed the Cigna Mindfulness Break podcast. If you had a chance to check that out on simple methods to calm the mind, body, and strengthen awareness. Now, before I begin our introduction of Nicole, I just want to let you know, if you're interested in asking a question, Nicole is definitely entertaining those questions from us. Please make sure you put that in the Q&A. Make sure you put your questions within the Q&A and not the chat, because we want you all to use the chat function to talk amongst yourself and give us and also reactions to what you're hearing. But if you have a question, please make sure you put that in the Q&A. So with that being said, I am now going to introduce our keynote. She is not only a mentor and an executive coach, an international certified life coach, which I need to learn more about that. Best known for working with individuals and teams who are ready to make courageous transformation. With more than 12 years of local government experience, including working in budget and long-range financial planning, her career includes serving as the Parks and Recreation Director, Parks and Rec, I can never say the whole term right at this point, Public Works Director and Assistant City Manager. She co-founded Arizona Women Leading Government, which is awesome, and the Sustainability Cities Network in partnership with Arizona State University. A coach on ICMA's Coach Connection platform. I hope you all are accessing that. It's a great tool. And proudly serves on the board of Arizona's Children's Association, which is totally awesome. She's currently serves as the CEO of Land Strategies, where she helps individuals find the courage, clarity to live life on their terms. It is with great pleasure. Love the colors, always the colors. I want to see the sneaks, but I know you can't. Please welcome Nicole Lance. Nicole, take over.
I'm nowhere near that bendy, Kimberly. Nobody needs to see me try and do that ever. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for that. We should have put a TLDR on that for sure. So if you are still awake, which I am going to be kind to myself and assume that you are, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My first question for everybody today really kind of centers around the idea of why we chose this topic of ditching the doubt. So when we were looking at what would be helpful, what might we want to talk about, we really kind of came back to this idea of what is the thing that often holds women leaders back, and like what's the thing that if we could solve that, make a little bit of headway, it would really make a difference. So that's where we really kind of centered in on this. So the very first question I have for you is, how many of you have ever should on yourselves? Now, that could be happening in public, that could be happening in private, but shoulding yourself is that thing that you do when you, maybe, at least for me, it happens when I first wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I should have set the alarm earlier. I should already be at the gym. I should be packing this organic, locally sourced bento box for my, pre-K 4-year-old to take to school, like all the other, parents do, which like none of them actually do. Actually, that's not true. In my daughter's school, a couple of them do, but they're not the ones I hang out with. So there we go. But it's like that should. It happens all day long. We choose to go to the council meeting or the commission meeting, and we're sitting there worrying about like, oh, I should be somewhere else. I should. And how many of you have ever been shut on by someone else, which oftentimes could be well-intentioned, but isn't always. And it's like that thing that other people do to you also, where they're like, you should apply for that job. You should really be part of this. You should be watching that webinar. You should be on keto. You should be counting your macros. You should. Right? And it could be a should, it could be a should not as well. Chris, you're totally right. So what is the thing that happens with this? Like, why is this a problem? And then what the heck do we do about it? And that's really where I want to focus today. Well, the first reason that shoulding on ourselves or being should on by somebody else is a problem is because it often creates guilt. It often creates guilt. So we end up under that big like pile of should at the end of the day. And guilt is really insidious because it will drive behaviors that aren't necessarily aligned with what we actually want to do or how we actually want to show up in the world. Now, where does this come from, right? This kind of like the guilt factor and, the shooting on ourselves, all this stuff. Well, some of it comes from our like biology and how we kind of grew as human beings, as a species. Because those of us who were really able to manage for a lot of things at once, think like, do we have fire? Do we have protection? Do we have enough to eat? Do we have fresh water? Do we have somewhere to sleep? Are the kids, playing too near the river? Blah, blah, blah. Those of us who developed that ability to scan kind of environmentally and do all of that were more likely to pass on our genes, which is great, except come to today. And every time we're in something, it's often that we're able to see all of the other possibilities that are out there, right? Like, oh, I'm here, but I could be doing that. I should. Now, the other place it comes from is really between our own two ears. What I mean by this is all of the adopted frameworks that we have taken on, been given or been should on by somebody else, by institutions, by schools, by mentors, by family systems, all of these things, societal systems, social media, and they come in kind of unfiltered. And until we do some of the work in here, that's part of what else can create that should factor. And Linda, you're absolutely right. It is controlling language. Absolutely. Now, the other problem with shoulding on ourselves is that it creates doubt. It creates doubt. Now, there's an important distinction here that I always want to make between doubt and fear. So doubt is, I don't know if I can do this. Like, oof, I want to do that thing. I don't know if I actually can, right? And this is for the person that's saying it's more so the imposter syndrome. I only talk about imposter syndrome in the context of doubt, because that's generally the feeling that is created, because imposter syndrome in and of itself is a problematic construct that came about as a word or kind of phrase in the 1970s that was white woman centric in its origins. So it was exclusive in its origins, and it ignores a lot of the systemic problems. And it tends to blame the victim. So you have imposter syndrome, you fix it, rather than looking at all of these other things. So I'm going to focus on doubt, but it is connected, just kind of in a little bit of a different way. So doubt is different than fear. So fear is, I don't know if I should do this. I don't know if I should. So again, we're kind of seeing that shoulding thing right there. Yeah, I'm shoulding myself right now. I need to know how to make it stop. Well, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a couple of tactics, because doubt shows up literally everywhere. Right? I don't know if I can do this. And a lot of times it's only in here, but we're going to hear it and see it in contexts and conversations around us in the workplace as well. So I am going to give you 8 strategies to ditch the doubt. Yes, we will be done on time. So anybody, especially on ICMA's side, who's worried about that, will get through them. It's going to move pretty quick. Take the strategies that work for you. And also, if they don't resonate for you, look for where this might be happening in the systems around you and the people that you are surrounded by. So number 1, I want to focus on reducing the guilt factor, So that thing that happens when you should on yourself or you get shoulded on by somebody else. So number 1, start a tally. This is building awareness. I believe fundamentally self-awareness is the step to how we move forward powerfully and intentionally to create lives and careers that we love. So start with, how many times is this happening to me in a day? Am I doing it to myself? Is it coming from somebody else? Now, remember, it can be totally well-intentioned. I'm only trying to help, right? You'll hear phrases like that, but just pay attention to it so that you can start to strengthen that filter. And I'm going to give you a real specific tool for this a little bit later in the presentation, but just start by how many times that's happening to you. And then maybe like the next day, look at how many times you do it to other people. Again, could be for a good purpose and also not having the effect that you really, really want. First question is to ask, who is on your board of directors? who's on your board of directors. Now, what I mean by this is if you think of an organization, a corporation, or even in the construct of local government, you have a council and manager, if that's your form of government. Who's on that board of directors that gets to have a voice in what you are doing and what you're thinking, what you're saying? Because often the voices just come in, and when we don't filter them, that's when they get to have kind of an inordinate amount of influence beyond kind of what we want. Sorry, I'm trying to like keep an eye on the chat, keep an eye on this as well. Yeah, anyone can feel like an imposter and their feelings can be validated. Yep, Debbie, that's why that conversation needs to be bigger than just kind of like blaming that person for not feeling confident enough. Totally agree. Okay, so strategy number 2, we've kind of looked at where are we shoulding ourselves or being should on, who's on my board of directors and who am I letting have a say in that. Now I want you to think about like reframing your focus. So this is another strategy to kind of ditch that doubt, because it's created when we're hyper aware of all of those other options around there. So reframing the focus looks like this. It looks like focusing on what you have said yes to instead of what you have said no to, because that focus on what we're saying no to is often what will cause the discomfort and like, ooh, that doesn't feel good, because we're putting emphasis on what we've not gone to. So think of it like I have chosen to go to the staff team retreat because I want to be there, or I'm supporting a team member, or it's just good for me to get that exposure experience. And that means I'm missing something going on at home. So while I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about the thing that I'm not going to, it's going to create some of that guilt and tension. So reframing that focus, allowing to be just on, this is the thing I've said yes to, and that's what I'm going to allow to hold my attention. All right, now, next strategy, number 3, is leave the gremlins on the table. Now, this comes from a very specific conversation I had with a coaching client once whose dream job had posted, and she was basically paralyzed from even applying for it. She was totally stuck, couldn't get the materials out. And we sat down and I said, tell me what's on your mind. And for every doubtful thought, she wrote it on a sticky note and we stuck them all around the table, like laid them out on the table. Here are all the things. And I said, okay, now those thoughts are your gremlins. This is usually what I imagine they look like. Those thoughts are your gremlins. And what I want you to do is do the thing anyway, because we can spend a lot of time and effort trying to overcome, or why am I having that thought? Like, oh, I keep thinking that thing. And it really isn't always as productive as just moving forward in spite of having those thoughts. So that's leaving the gremlins on the table. It's a version of yes, and yes, I feel doubtful, scared, nervous, etc. And I'm going to move forward anyway. I'm going to go ahead and do that thing despite all of these gremlins. And I'm just kind of let them sit on the table, but maybe have a softer voice. Yeah, Linda, that breaking physical tasks into smaller steps. Yeah, it's helped you not to feel bad. What's interesting about that is if you take any large task and break it down into smaller tasks, your brain will actually stimulate a little hit of dopamine into your system and you will feel better and actually be more likely to accomplish it. So I'm glad that strategy works. And also, I think that's a pretty great strategy kind of for all of us. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, here's strategy number 4. Tame those thoughts. Tame those thoughts. And what I mean by this is we can't really stop the thoughts that we have. It may come over time with like a ton of practice. And the person that was asking if that's similar to CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, it's kind of related work. So there's ties and like little threads to that. But this is I'm going to give you a couple of strategies that I've learned that have helped me with this when I have those thoughts that like, ugh, I'm done thinking this. And so one of the places this first came up actually was with a coaching client who was a finance director in her organization. There had been a management change right above her. It was a really rough transition. And we were meeting and she said, Nicole, my insomnia is off the charts. I'm laying in bed at 1:30 in the morning. And all I can think about is my boss and what my boss has said and the ways that we're different. And I don't like the direction we're going. And, and she kept saying it. And I kind of just blurted out, do you want your boss in bed with you at 1:30 in the morning? And we both kind of like stopped and we're like, ew, gross. That's totally not what we want. And that's not where we're going. But that's what her experience kind of was, because those thoughts were coming in and she didn't have a filter for them. So one of my friends, Emma Magenta, who's also a life coach, she says you can't delete thoughts, but you can learn to transform them. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of one of the tools that I use for that for myself and with my coaching clients. So it's predicated on a sort of model of understanding where thoughts fit in our experience called the 4 categories of human experience. This comes from the Martha Beck Wayfinder Life Coaching Institute. So at the top of the hierarchy, we have a circumstance. The circumstance is the thing that is. I am sitting in my office listening to this presentation. I am, at home because my partner has COVID and I'm on watch and can't leave the house, whatever the circumstance is. That circumstance generates a thought, right? Some thought. This is good. This is bad. I wish it was something else. They shouldn't have done that. I should have said this, whatever it is. There's some sort of thought. Whatever that thought is generates an emotion from it. So this is bad might generate the emotion of despair, guilt, envy, insecurity, whatever it could be. And those emotions are what are going to direct your behaviors. So there's the circumstance, the thing that we think about it, which remember, you can't delete a thought, but you can transform it. That's what we're going to do. The emotion it creates, and then the behavior. So in the hierarchy, the thought level is the most important part. This is where we have the most sway kind of over the fulcrum of how we will experience our emotional experience, and then ultimately what behaviors we have afterwards. So the trick is to kind of figure out what I'm thinking so that I can transform this, So if I am turned down for a promotion that I believe I should have gotten, I applied for it, I was really excited, and I don't get it. And my thought is, I'm a failure is going to make me feel probably pretty yucky. I feel pretty yucky. I'm going to have behaviors associated with either trying to make myself feel better or behaviors that I turn to when I do feel bad, which may or may not be what I actually want to do. For me, that often involves like Cheetos and Mountain Dew on a couch somewhere. So probably not my desired behavior. So I'm going to give you a tool that when you can figure out that kind of thought or get close to it, because thoughts will kind of work like tangled Christmas lights or balls of snakes. If you think about that, like kind of writhing around, if you get close enough to one of them, you're going to bump into the other ones that are happening. So I'm a failure. Here's a set of tools to deal with those thoughts. Okay. So this comes from a body of work by Dr. Stephen Hayes. I am not a trained therapist. I'm not trained in the entirety of his body of work. I know this one specific tool. So that's what I am offering. So the first step is simply to say out loud 4 times, I'm having the thought that. So in that case, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. Right? I didn't get the position. I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. You say it out loud 4 times. After that, you say out loud 4 times, I notice I'm having the thought that I am a failure. I notice I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. I notice I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. I notice I'm having a thought that I'm a failure. What these 2 steps do is they remove you from living and experiencing the thought, like in the depths of it. And they take you 1 step back first. I'm having the thought that, and then they take you a 2nd step back. I notice I'm having the thought that. And what that does is it gives you objectivity from being and feeling the thought into, okay, I'm actually over here and I'm having this thought. I'm now back here and I notice I'm having that thought. So it's designed to give you emotional distance from it so that when you are objective, you can figure out what you want to do with the thought. Do I want to keep thinking it? Do I want to change it into something else? So 3rd step is you give that thought a title of some sort. So that one could just be, oh, I'm having the I'm a failure thought again. I'm having the I'm a failure thought again. I notice I'm having the failure. I'm a failure thought again. So mine, and we're talking about doubt. I have one that is an I'm a fraud thought, right? Relative to like imposter syndrome, doubt-based, like fear gets all mixed up in there. That's kind of like my ball of snakes, tangled Christmas lights kind of thought. But sometimes I'll come into groups like, say, an amazing group of leaders like this and say, who the heck am I to be talking to these people? I'm a total fraud. Okay. So now I've named my thought. It's my I'm a fraud thought. And then the next step is you make yourself sing the thought. So you put it to music. Now, Dr. Hayes recommends starting with something really easy like Jingle Bells or Happy Birthday. And you would sing something like, I'm a big fraud today. I'm a big fraud today. I'm a big fraud every day. I'm a big fraud today. And it's like, okay, by the time I'm done doing that, I'm actually rewiring my neural pathway to kind of say, that's actually kind of funny when I sing that. Like, oh yeah, I actually know how to deal with this thought. I've had it before. So it's designed intentionally to rewire your experience of that thought from something negative and harmful and hard into something that maybe has a little bit more levity with it, so that again, you can move forward intentionally. It's self-awareness, and it's also that transformation. Now, I'm a little bit extra, so I actually sing mine to the tune of Michael Jackson's Bad when I have the I'm a fraud thought. And so I'll sing something like, cause I'm a fraud, I know it, they know it. And it's like, okay, that's ridiculous. And the trick is really, if you can get somewhere where you can do it out loud, you will feel so silly that it will lighten up kind of what's happening in your system. Then you can kind of move forward a little bit more intentionally. So, all right, moving on. Strategy number 5. Again, these are designed to help us deal with doubt so that we can kind of courageously transform our lives and our careers into things that we really want to do. Now, this strategy is designed to disrupt the I have to thinking. And it's so kind of like questioning, what are those thought frameworks? Who are those people that may or may not be on my board of directors that are giving me input? What are the things that I believe about my life that are mandatory? And then how do I actually want to handle them instead? So this tool is called the 3 Bs. This is also from the Martha Beck Life Coaching Institute. So the 3 Bs works like this. Think forward kind of to your to-do list over the next couple of months and see if you can come up with 2 or 3, maybe 4 if you have that many, at least 1 to play with for the purposes of this. Things that you don't want to do, like things that you're like, ugh, I'm really not excited about that. It could be a meeting you have to go to, a conversation you have to have with a coworker or someone in your family system, taking your car in for an oil change. I have to go to the dentist. If anybody knows this about me already, or if you've seen me in other places, dentist is not my favorite thing. So just write down 2 and 3 things that you don't really want to do. And we're going to work with this tool. Now, taxes, Deanna. Amen. Amen. So this also works with team environments. So if your team is facing a challenge, maybe it's a really big one, or maybe you've broken it up into these smaller pieces, you can also do this here, as well as with like repetitive tasks, anything that you're kind of looking at that whenever you look at it, you're like, ugh, that doesn't feel great. So here's how the 3 Bs works. You have your list and you're going to go through each of those items. And the first question you're going to ask is, can I actually bag this? Could I actually bag it? And this is designed to disrupt that have to thinking that says there's no other way. It is what it is. This is how we do it around here. This is the thing that's expected. This is the thing I have to deliver. So instead, could I actually bag this? Now, Deanna, like, sorry, taxes, you can't actually bag, at least not for very long. You could bag them for a little bit and decide to pay a penalty later. I don't know that I would, or any tax professional would recommend that necessarily. So the oil change, does it really have to be done this weekend? You know, maybe it does. Maybe you're just trying to get ahead of things. Can I change the have to get to? Totally different strategy, Jenny, but yes, that's predicated upon this idea that you exist at choice, that we all exist at choice all of the time, even when we're in really hard situations. I get to, or I'm choosing to, is sometimes used there. I hesitate to talk about that in short presentations because there's so much context and nuance around the pressure and like get to and toxic optimism. But yeah, that is absolutely. Okay, so can I bag it? That's the first thing. Second one, and some of you are already one step ahead of me, can I barter it? Could I delegate it to someone? Could I pay somebody else to do it? Could I go to the webinar this week? You go to the webinar next week, we'll trade notes. I'll take the first half of the presentation, you take the second half, Is there a way for me to actually barter some of these things? Now, in my house, taking the car for an oil change, I will barter that with my partner as many times as possible for like a wide variety of other things that I don't mind doing. So that's a barter. Can't bag it, but I could barter it. Now, the third one is better it. If I can't bag it or don't want to, I can't barter it or don't want to, how can I actually better this instead? Like what's a way that I could better it? So dentist, I can't bag that. That's not going to get better if I keep doing that. I can't barter it like my teeth, my head, but I can better it. So I have a going to the dentist playlist that I'll play in the car on the way there, which is kind of ridiculous, but I'm going to own it. That works for me. It betters the experience. And I don't care if it's the most routine 20-minute cleaning, I get a milkshake afterwards. And that's like what I attach to it to better it. So for teams, you've got a difficult task, you're preparing for this meeting, we have to have a hard conversation. What are ways that we could better it? Hard conversations. Let's pay attention to the time of day, the place that we're doing it. What do I need for myself to feel good? Is there a pair of shoes that are my favorite that I want to wear? Is there meditation I like to listen to before I do that? Is there something that I can stack into my schedule right after that? Anything to make that better, because I do believe that is one of the most powerful ways that we can start to shift our work and our life experiences. Absolutely. Okay. So number 6 is aligning with authenticity, And there's a bunch of ways to do this. I'm going to give you one that will fit in the kind of like terms of this presentation, which is based on the information that your body has for you. So a lot of us that are these like high achiever types, and we get a lot done, and a lot of people rely on us, and we love to serve, and we overgive, and maybe we overdo, and maybe we overschedule. We are really good at living in our heads. Right? That's where the magic happens. That's where I think logically. That's how I come up with the creative idea. That's how I execute. That's how I stay on top of everything, is because here. And one of the things that often gets sacrificed is we miss out on what our body is also trying to say this. So in coaching, this is a much longer kind of technique. I'm going to give you like a really abbreviated version of it. So the first thing I want you to do is think of something you love. Think of something you love. It could be an experience that you have loved to have or love to have. It could be a treat that you like to give yourself, a pet, a friend, like a travel experience you've had, but come up with like one kind of memory or thought of something that is something you really, really love. So for me, I might think about how it feels when my daughter sits on my lap and we read books at night before bed. That feeling where she's almost too big to do it, but she's still kind of sitting right here, and I get to hang on to her when we're reading. So think of that. And I want you to take a quick stock of like what your body feels like when you think of that. Like, so for me, my shoulders kind of relax. I feel like a little bit of warmth in my chest. My belly's relaxed, and it's just like, it's like a warm blanket kind of feeling. That's how I feel. So see if you can clue into like what's physically happening, not what you're thinking or feeling, but like physically, what's happening in your muscles, what's happening in your shoulders, what's happening in your thighs and your feet and your hands, any physical sensations. So think of that in the context of something you love. Now, I am going to ask that you repeat after me. Now, this is on the honor system because I can't see all of you, but I'm going to ask that you at least whisper the words or mouth the words that I'm about to put up on the screen. And we're going to say it 3 times. And I want you to notice what happens in your body when you do this. Okay. If you're able to say it out loud, or if you're in a group, like loud and proud this part. Okay. But notice what happens in your body. All right. I love to vomit. I love to vomit. I love to vomit. Okay, now if you're on a headset and you're speaking out loud and some of your coworkers don't have them on, they're gonna be like, what are you talking about? But this is really insightful, because even when I say that, my face kind of like squinches up and I'm like, oh, that's hard to say. Often I'll do this in large groups and people are like, I'm not gonna do it, because it's so counter to how we actually feel, Now that feeling in your body when you're saying something like, I love to vomit, That's a data point for you to recognize. So when I'm making a decision, I'm considering how I want to respond. What do I want to put in? I will often tune in and think about option A. If my body gets that kind of more relaxed, warm blanket kind of feeling versus the I love to vomit, which like for me, my tummy kind of goes like this, my face like makes a face and my hands kind of naturally like move into a productive place. That's a data point from my body saying, this may not be aligned. This may not be authentic for you. You will still move forward with whatever choice it is, but you'll have one more piece of information. And this tool, we call it the body compass in coaching, is one of the ways to keep you out of moving into decisions that are those should kind of decisions. Okay. So what's my body feeling? Does it feel good, relaxed? Is it feeling like when she made me say that kind of thing? All right. Strategy number 7 is a strategy around intentionality. Now, there are, again, a million ways to do this. I'm going to give you one. This is one that's been really transformative for me specifically over the last 6 months or so that I've really been working with it. So this one actually comes from one of my coaches, Natalie Miller. That's her website. And that is a very poor PNG image of her time witchery planner, which is a daily planner. Now, I've never been a planner person. I'm a hardcore calendar and to-do list person, but not like, oh, let me get a planner. This one's like an anti-planner. So I pulled a couple of the key questions that are daily practice that I want to give you as kind of like a daily power play so that you can really construct days that work well for you based on what's in front of you. So the first question to ask, and this doesn't have to be like, let me back up and say like 5 o'clock in the morning before everyone wakes up, like, with candles burning and like, essential oils going. You can do this at any point during the day. It's just good like towards the morning because it'll impact. So how do I want today to feel? This is like a vibe kind of question. I want today to feel unrushed. I want today to feel confident, happy, relaxed, calm, powerful, productive. Come up with like 2 or 3 adjectives so that you can sort of center into, if that's how I want to feel, what do I need to do? That will drive my actions. If I'm looking to feel confident and powerful, I'm going to show up a little bit differently than if I'm looking to feel relaxed and peaceful or unrushed, perhaps. Second question, what are all my to-dos? And what I mean by this when it says all of my to-dos is a lot of us will have like our calendar for the day up and we're like, yep, I see all that. And then we write all the other things that aren't on the calendar as our to-do list. And it's like, actually, you need to have both lists like one place so that you can see all of it for this reason. That's the time to reality check it. Is this all actually possible based on what I'm trying to accomplish today? Okay. So here's all the meetings, here's all the things like in addition to that. And then sometimes you have to say, okay, that's actually not all going to happen today. What can I renegotiate for tomorrow? What can I bag? What could I barter? Next question is when I'm looking at that big list that often I ignore all my meetings and I say, well, I only have 3 big things to do today. And they're like, oh, but I have 6 meetings also. Like, okay, that's going to be a little bit different. So how am I going to fuel all of this? It might be actually eating breakfast. Like it might actually be food fuel. I need to plan for lunch. I'm looking at some of you, specifically my lunch skippers, right? Or I'm just going to answer a few emails, right? Plan for that. It might be like, I need to call a friend. I need to drink lemon water. I need to take a nap or a micro meditation or something like that. But how am I going to fuel all of this? And yeah, Logan over in the Q&A, these questions are asked in the anti-planner. It's part of like a daily thing. So yeah, that's a pretty awesome tool that I recommend. Fourth question, what is most important today? This is really powerful because we often get like these huge to-do lists and everything feels like it's A1, but you can look at that and pretty much go, the most important thing today, and it doesn't even say thing, it says what is most important, might be a thing or a task, or it might be like something about how you want to feel. What's most important for me today is making sure that I listen to my favorite song before I go into that meeting. I want to remember that, so I'm going to write it down. So what's most important today? And then lastly, and I love this question, what am I opting out of? What am I opting out of? Now that might be a task or thing. For me, I often find myself writing things in like, I am opting out of fear and frenzy. today, because that to-do list gets long and I'm like, my inner drill sergeant comes out and I'm like, oh, like, here we go. And then it's like, boom, 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 boom. And that's not actually how I want to feel. So I'm going to opt out of drill sergeant mode and move into like calm, productive mode instead. So what am I opting out of? Sometimes I will also find like, oh, those 4 things I wrote down, I'm going to renegotiate those till tomorrow. Those don't actually need to happen. So it's just a tool to kind of help you move really intentionally. And so Esperanza, you said I number my options 1 to 6 and I focus on the most important to-dos. Then I focus on the next ones the next day. Yep. And here's the thing, everybody, you're in charge of this list. Like deadlines might be driven by other people, but you get to be in charge of this list. So if things need to move around or have different importance, and all of a sudden like buying great grandma's birthday card should come to, or you want it to come to the top of the list, like then you can do that because it's your list. So, okay. So we're coming down to the last couple of minutes. I've got one last strategy that I want to share with you. Drop questions into the Q&A. Pop them. I'll try and keep an eye in the chat. If it gets too busy, I might miss them though. So pop them into the Q&A. You know, we can do a little bit of that. All right. So here is strategy number 8. Number 8 is kind of one of those says easy, does hard sort of strategies. So like, oh yeah, I'm going to give myself credit. Like that feels great. And then it's like, oh, but how do I actually do this? But I want to talk first about why this is important. Like, oh, hi, Bridget. Why this is really important to do, because it's related to this concept of enoughness. I am not enough. I've not done enough. It's never enough, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Never enough. So this idea of enoughness. So this conversation again came from my coach, same one who did the planner. But on a podcast, she had this really amazing quote that one of my most persistent limiting beliefs is that I can never do enough, no matter what, no matter where. I have this persistent sense that I have not done enough, that I cannot do enough. And when I was listening to that, I was like, get out of my head. That's literally something that goes through my head. Also, get out of my clients' heads, because it's literally things that I hear from my clients that I coach as well. So this idea that like, when is it ever enough? And here's what I think about it. I think maybe your butt is too big. Now, if you aren't looking at the screen, or there's, it's difficult to read, there's an impairment of some sort. It's but with 1 T, B-U-T. That's the thing that we're like, well, yeah, but yeah, that was it. But like, you know, yeah, I'm, you know, a single mom and I'm doing this, but like other people have 3 kids. I only have 1. Right? Yeah, that was a thing, but it could have been so much better. But. And we have this huge but that gets in the way of like really kind of how we can navigate our own enoughness. So the question for this, and there's sort of like a sub question implied here, is, are you giving yourself enough credit? And for many of us, it's probably not, right? So kind of flip on this, if you feel like this is good for you, is where could you give yourselves more credit? Where could you give yourselves more credit? Or where am I not giving myself credit at all? And one of the ways this showed up in a conversation with a client is we were talking about the end of her day. And she was like, I haven't done anything today. And I said, well, tell me what you actually did. And she goes, well, I got up and, you know, I made coffee so my partner didn't have to. I got my daughter to school and I had 2 meetings, and then I didn't go for a walk at lunch, but I went ahead and did this. And I had a couple more meetings in the afternoon. I cleared out my email inbox, and she lists out all of these things. And Christy, you are absolutely right. It's easy to point out to friends. It's harder to do it for ourselves. And so that's where we need to learn to cultivate this practice of answering this question honestly. And so at the end of it, she said, holy cow, I did a lot more than I thought I did. And she kind of sat there and she goes, no wonder I'm exhausted. I'm like, yes. So giving yourself credit and also helping other people do this as well. Not in a shoulding way, but in a way that is supportive and kind of illuminating. Here's how I see you. Okay. And Janet says, try substituting but for and. This is a challenge and it works. Okay. Go ahead and drop a question. We have a couple minutes. If you've got one, drop it in the Q&A. There was a question to repeat strategy 7. Strategy 7 was the be intentional. And that was the this set of questions. So it doesn't have to be you don't have to go out and buy the planner that I have or the anti-planner, but looking at those questions of cultivating that practice again of not like, I always say, don't let your day own you, like own your day, don't let your day own you. Of we go into work, we let traffic dictate how we're feeling or how frustrated we are. We let whether or not the partner and the kids, if you have one or them, get out of the house on time. We let the angry person in the elevator kind of dictate our mood. And this is flipping that on its head. How do I want to feel instead? And then what are the things that we could do instead? Okay. All right. Oh, Mary's coming in with a tip for giving yourself credit. Okay, a couple questions are coming in. What was the name of coach and school of thought the 3 Bs came from? That was the Martha Beck, B-E-C-K, Wayfinder Life Coach Training. So that was that's the school that I am trained through. Okay, so how do we help our bosses recognize what we can humanly do is enough? Like to add more. Yes. Okay. So this is really hard, and this is a very prevalent conversation. I think it's always been prevalent in workplaces, but it's like we sort of open the doors more and more people are having these conversations. I was working with a group in Pennsylvania preparing for an upcoming conference, and they basically said, like, what do you do when the job has become untenable? Like, the workload is too much, the appreciation's not enough, the timeline is too tight, the resources aren't enough, like, and yet there's no like willingness to move any of that. So a couple thoughts on this. And again, there's always going to be nuance based on where you're at in your organization. And your kind of specific situation. The first one is to have a courageous conversation about the fact that it's happening. Like, this is, I'm coming and I'm going to have a courageous conversation with you. It's maybe hard for me to say some of this, but here's how I'm feeling. I'm afraid you're going to think I'm whining or I don't want to work hard, and it's not that, but it is genuinely, I don't feel like I can do any more. Would you help me look at this? And for that, it's really important, although I've talked a lot about like feelings and emotions today, it's really important to move into specifics. Here's where I'm feeling the crunch. Here's what the overload is. Here's where the overlapping timelines are, because that'll do 2 things when you get real clear on that. Number one, you're going to get clarity on where your pinch points are and what the problems are. And also, like, I hate to say this, but where you might be contributing to some of that. Or not, or where there's a systemic issue kind of around it. The other thing is it will move it into something more actionable for the person that you're talking with. Now, often what comes up when I say that is, I've already tried that and it didn't work. They're not going to listen. And I think at that point, when that's reality, you have a hard decision to make about how you're going to either continue to survive and operate within that system or move from it. So that, again, is sort of one of those hard reality checks. And my best recommendation for that is get it out of your head. We will think and think and think, but thought loops don't always complete. And when we get it on paper into something that we actually can see and feel and touch and deal with, it's going to be a little bit easier. So you could do that via a journal, or you could do that with a coach, with a friend, with a mentor that has and can hold kind of safe space for you. So hopefully that helps just a little bit. Okay, we've got a couple in the chat, and we've got a little bit of a tech issues. So we are going to pivot a little bit differently instead of the live break that was planned, which means I get to answer a couple more questions. So Laura, just keep me posted when I need to, what did Kimberly say at the beginning? Like, get the hook out and like take me off screen. So yeah, Mary's strategy for giving yourself credit is to think how you've helped someone. Yep, anybody. And then we have a question from Michelle. What do you do when you feel like you deserve credit for things you've done? Oh, but you're not getting the acknowledgement from those around you. Yes, that is, that's real hard. When you do deserve credit and you're not getting that acknowledgement. I have been there and it hurts. And that is, again, a place for an investigation. I would say, like, what are the thoughts I'm having around that? And what do I want to do with them? Is this something where I need to acknowledge my disappointment, give myself some credit and move on? Does this prompt a larger question or conversation kind of because of that? And then is there a conversation that needs to kind of be had? Hold on one sec. Somebody asked me to put up this slide again so they could see the quote. So yeah, you're not getting the acknowledgement from those around you. That can be problematic. That can actually impact your career growth. So that is something to watch out for as well. That at times that does need to transition into a courageous conversation about whether or not that's happening. You can also ask for help depending on the situation. That's amplification. That was the thing that came from Barack Obama's White House with some of the women who were getting kind of overrun, and they decided to start amplifying the voices of the other women to make sure that they were heard or make sure that they were acknowledged. And then also kind of from there, once you have some of those data points, like, oof, what do we want to do if this is going to continue to be my reality? How is it kind of impacting? Okay. Scroll down. Yeah, or if somebody else takes credit for your work or ideas. That is hard. And that sometimes is a deal with it in the moment. And maybe I want to say, like, hey, I love that we're going down that road. And also, you know, awkward moment, but that was something I, you know, voiced. May not be very comfortable, and it may not be appropriate. That could be dealt with afterwards as well, depending on kind of, again, what the context is. But this is also a place, get it out of your head and get it into a voice with somebody else or into some sort of setting where you can kind of sort your thoughts out and figure out what you want to do emotionally intentionally from there. I was going to say, like, also kind of watch your emotional reaction there so that you can like take that into account and also move from the point for that. Okay. All right. We are going to wrap up in 4 minutes. So it's actually about 3 from here. Somebody said, would you kindly talk about number 4 a little bit more? Number 4, oh yeah, number 4 is thought work. So this is where and there's a question that came through about aligning with authenticity. I'm going to put a pin in that. Okay, I'm gonna do this real quick. So number 4 is about understanding what we're thinking. So this was the that kind of hierarchy of how thoughts are created based on what the circumstance is. So somebody takes my idea and gets credit for it, and I'm thinking, whatever, they're a jerk, I'm a failure, this is ridiculous, I should leave, whatever. Now I'm going to notice those thoughts before I get to the emotional state. Like, and maybe that kind of happens simultaneously, but I might write them all down and then say, okay, which of these do I want to keep thinking? Which of these do I want to respond to? And then how do I want to move forward from that? So it's really just awareness. I have one that I call the Jurassic Park thought. It's a relationship in my life that I don't feel like I can divest from, but I feel like that little goat tied to the stake in the first Jurassic Park movie, spoiler alert, the T-Rex eats it, that I notice I'm having the Jurassic Park thought, and I'm like, that's actually not true. There's things that I can do to move safely from here. Okay. I know we're getting close, Laura, so just pop on whenever you need to. There's 2 more questions that I haven't answered. One is, can you talk more about aligning with authenticity, especially when you have to do something that isn't true to you? Before I answer this, I'm going to put up my contact info. So if anybody wants to stay connected, this is where you can find me on the socials. So aligning with authenticity, if you have to do something that isn't true to you, again, what is the context? Is there a bag it or barter it or better it solution? That'd be a great place for the 3 Bs. And then again, as always, an ICMA would tell you this as well. Are we within the code of ethics? Are we operating ethically? Is it still something that I can do in a way that's ethically safe for me as well? Does this make sense? So that would be, how do I move through this, or, you know, recommend this or go through this? with my integrity intact? What is a way to do that? Yeah. And then what do you do when you've communicated your need language, but are not getting that need met or credit for work or achievements? And again, is there movement or possibility for a conversation? Do you need to examine also how you're thinking about that? Like, is this even realistic for me to expect it from here? Is this, I keep thinking that's how it should be, but like, is that the gap between expectation and desire? Like, kind of what's going on. And then is there somebody else who could help? Is there somebody else that could help? Is there another way to kind of get that done? So we are ready for break. So Kimberly, I see you.
Hi.
And thank you to everybody, not just for being here, but for doing what you do. It matters, and I know it, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nicole. You are just amazing in every way possible. And thank you for the insight and knowledge that you dropped this morning with that beautiful jacket. I love the color. With that being said, for those who are still with us, thank you for joining. Continue to join. We're going to take a break. And if you can please go back to the podcast, there's a link. It's called the SIGNA Podcast, Knowledge Center, Climbing Mindfulness Podcast. If you can go ahead and go to that, that'll be great. And I believe we'll be back after the 15th. So join us back for our next session. But until then, if you can go and take a listen to the podcast, the SIGNA Podcast. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Nicole, once again. Bye now.